So one of the things My Sister's House is known for is our cultural responsiveness. So what does that mean? First, we have to look at what defining culture and cultural responsiveness. So culture, as you probably know, has to do with beliefs, values, thoughts, history, ceremony. So there are many things that factor into culture. And culture, many would argue that culture has also changed, hopefully for a good, in good ways. But the important part of folks' identity. So cultural responsiveness has to deal with the ability to learn and relate to people. And why is that cultural responsiveness important? Well, often, unfortunately, the lack of cultural responsiveness is a barrier to receiving services. And especially when you're talking about domestic violence, it's important to receive services if you wish to prevent and intervene in the problem. So calling, for example, if we don't have people who can answer the telephone and speak with people in their primary language, then those telephone calls to our crisis line are not going to occur. Or that face-to-face contact, if we don't have people who can understand the different languages when someone speaks. So for example, with Vinder, our lead counselor, multi-talented, and part of her multi-talents include being able to be multilingual. And if we have a client who speaks one of her languages, she can tell her story. She can tell about the trauma that occurred because we are providing culturally responsive services. Oftentimes people talk about trauma-based healing, that's a big word, but the reality is that trauma-based healing has to begin with understanding folks' culture and being able to relate to folks' culture. So cultural responsiveness is critical for that. And especially in a state like California, where the majority state are people of color, are people who speak another language, and that demographic is only going to continue, that it's imperative where that we recognize that and we deal with that. Many of you may not know that the story of My Sister's House and why it began was because there were unfortunately some deaths involving some Asian-speaking women in the Sacramento area. So this was before my time, before the rest of our staff's time. But thankfully, community leaders recognized that there was a need to be able to provide services differently so that domestic violence would not continue as a hidden or silent epidemic or pandemic in our community. So it's now, as the demographics continue, it's culturally responsive services are critical more than ever. And how do we become culturally responsive? It's an all-round effort, from our outreach to making sure that we are in the community, in the Asian Pacific Islander community, that we are using Asian Pacific Islander social media to be able to tell our story, to talk about our services, to be able to talk about the issue of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, that's critical. So from our outreach efforts to making sure that we have the right staff, to making sure that our values and our traditions are that we're able to incorporate that and reflect that in the services that we provide. We often joke about, like, for example, Asian time, right? And we know that, for Western way of appointments, oftentimes 2 o'clock means the 2 o'clock that you and I know of. But on Asian time, that 2 o'clock, as some cultures notice, 2 o'clock is when I get there. And so we have to educate but meet people where we're at. That 2 o'clock has different meanings, and we need to make sure that, but ultimately we need to make sure that people are receiving the services that they need. So how can you help us serve the Sacramento area better? First, If you know someone who needs our services, please be that lifeline. Please tell them about My Sister's House. Please let them know that if they call us, they can call us in their primary language, and they just have to tell us their phone number. And then let them, and to also what language that they're looking for. So for instance, they might say their phone number a couple times and say Vietnamese. We will call back. We will have a Vietnamese speaking advocate call back, but the number will say private. So we need to make sure that that person picks up that telephone, because we will not answer, we will not leave a message for that person's safety. Okay. We will call several times in case that person doesn't answer, because we want to get through. But let the person know, let your friend know, let your sister know that we are here to help them. Second way that you could help us, obviously, is with Big Day of Giving. We appreciate your donation, which allows us to make sure that we have culturally responsive staff, that we have the cultural foods, the cultural cookware, that we have the practices that allow someone to feel comfortable staying with us and to begin to heal from their trauma.